There we go, recording. So welcome all to the Adaeze Cadet lecture, the HOK design principle. But before we get to the lecture, I wanted to go over a few announcements there. And I will say there's definitely been some trouble in Paradise with the hyperlink that's on the flyer. So if anyone contacts you, tell them to do what you must have done is definitely use the meeting ID and passcode. And we'll get that word to as many people as we can.
These are very smart students in here right now.
Yeah, well, they're in there. It's the ones that are.
Because
you know what's wrong, Ruben, is the meeting ID that's embedded in the URL is different than the meeting ID that's listed. That's what it is. So it's the wrong hyperlink.
Oh, oh, wow.
Yeah, because if you look at the number, so always when you get the URL, the meeting ID should match.
Should be in there and match. Yeah,
it doesn't. Part of Look at it closely. You'll see it doesn't match.
Okay.
Oh my.
So they have to go through their Zoom account and join and enter the correct meeting ID.
Right, and passcode. Yep. So preaching to the choir that's here now, but definitely if any of your buddies ask you, shoot that to them. In some announcements of what's coming up, I did notice that, well, somebody dropped by and Mr. Richardson know who she is. That's Annette Owens. Annette Owens, that's in the art department.
Fine arts.
Yeah, fine arts. They have a gallery that even I was unaware of, and there's a student exhibit going on, and I will share that. Make sure. No, I won't share it, but I'll just tell you the info. I can put the info in the chat later. But there's an exhibit going on.
The opening is May 25th.
That's it. Okay. Yeah.
May 25th.
No, actually,
at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, actually, it opened on May 16th. We'll go through June 2nd, but there is a reception on May 25th from 5 to 8 p.m.
Yep.
But gallery hours are Mondays and Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Wednesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 7 p.m. So, you know, you should stop over there at some point and take a look at what our students at ECC have to offer in fine arts. And
there may be some of our own architecture students, environmental technology students involved in that little student art show.
So I have some. So keep that in mind and make a point to do that. You got plenty of time to do that. Another thing I wanted to share that's a new and hot thing coming up is this event, or actually if I go to it where it's in a better light, here we go, is SoCal NOMA has a student showcase show that's going to be in collaboration with their monthly meeting. So the professionals meet the fourth Thursday of every month, and it is open to all. So maybe as school winds down, you can start to go to those and start to go anyway, because really everything's been shuttered since the pandemic. They had their first in-person meeting last month, and it was at Studio 111, the architectural firm in Long Beach, which the ECC Architecture Club actually visited last spring. So the meetings do move around and give you opportunities to see different spaces. This month's meeting, which is next week, Thursday, is going to be at SciArc, as you see here, and it's going to showcase the student work of different NOMAS student members from all the different schools. So some of yours truly here will be on exhibit. We'll have of our NOMAS students We have Abigail Vicente Ramirez and Ray Blask. Their work from Fertile Grounds will be on display there that day, and that'll give you opportunity to see work from students in all the different NOMAS chapters, which are both Cal Poly's, Woodbury, USC, probably Otis School of Design, and a number of others. Cal Baptist Riverside. I'm not naming them all, but it'll give you a chance to see that, get to see SciArc's school and all of that. So this is the date and time. Highly recommend you guys go do that and have an opportunity to meet design professionals too. So if you don't have class or something, you should go to that. And with that being said, that's the announcements I had. I wanted Mark Ebert to talk about Fertile Grounds and what's the big deal going on tomorrow with that.
Thank you, Ruben. The big deal.
It
It's
is
actually
a big
turning out to
deal.
be a really big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yes. A little bit more than I anticipated when I started this effort. Hi, everyone. You probably heard about our exhibition that is on view at the library. It's still at the library. It will be on the library at least through this week. They may ask us to keep it up one more week, but I'll know better tomorrow. So tomorrow we are having, am I able to share the screen?
Yes, you should be able to. Mhm.
Okay. So tomorrow is the kind of the second part to the exhibition, and this is a roundtable discussion called Cultivating Spaces for Student Success. We have a really interesting panel that will discuss how the role design plays in equity, inclusion, and student success. We have two outside design experts. One you're already familiar with if you were at the previous lecture, which is Stephen Lewis from ZGF. He's going to focus on the equity and inclusion part. Well, he won't focus only on that, but he'll bring that up into the discussion. And then Bene Del Vecchio, she is also a campus planner. And they will be joined by the Dean of Library and Learning Services, Dr. Crystal Martin, Jenny Simon, who is from Guided Pathways. This whole discussion evolves around student success and how and the programs that we're putting in place to enrich that opportunity. And of course, design plays a role in that. And then we'll be joined by Edwin Velez, who was a student at ECC, is now a student at Cal Poly, giving a student perspective, but also an outside student perspective, as well as Monica Rico, who's going to join us, being a current student. And so it's going to be an organic discussion about the role of design, why this is important, why are we talking about it now, and we'll give a brief presentation at the beginning, very brief, mostly to kind of do an overview of the student proposals, as well as early results from our ongoing campus-wide survey, determining preferences and priorities from students, faculty, and staff. And actually, if you guys, for those who have not taken it, you can actually hold your phone up to your screen and scan the QR code right there. And it will pull up the online survey. And this is what you should get to. You'll get to this screen. And it's just a short 10 question survey. It's really easy. You scroll down, most of them are multiple choice. Then there's a ranking coming up on these two, questions 7 and 8. You just basically, you rank them in order of priority. So each column should only have one dot. And then that's it. If you want to add a comment, you're happy to do so, feel free to do so. You can also do this at the exhibition and discussion tomorrow. There's actually a big map at the exhibition where you can actually write it on a Post-it note and take a colored pen and place it somewhere on the map. So there's all ways for the audience to get involved and participate in this discussion. Ultimately, this will all turn into some sort of report and set of recommendations that will be forwarded to the facilities committee as it relates to future master plan efforts. So whatever my students have done in Design Studio One, they've sparked a conversation, and the campus is interested in thinking about reimagining these external spaces around campus. And if you have any questions, write them in the chat. I'll try to answer them, or reach out to me via email. That's it.
There we go.
Thanks, Mark.
Very, very cool there.
I know most of you have been to the library to check this out. If you haven't, you really need to get there. And you should be there tomorrow around 4:30 tomorrow, Mark.
No, 4.
Okay, is it 4 o'clock?
The president is making her remarks around 4:15.
Okay, 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Right. And then I just found out the dean is going to close the session. The dean will make remarks to close it.
Is he mad?
No, I offered him to participate.
I'm kidding. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, he's excited about it as well.
Yeah, I had a meeting session with some of the panelists, and just some of the comments and a dialogue that was happening. I'm like, this is going to be an exciting event.
Very, very cool there. All right. And while we're waiting to get started, I will give a little update on a couple of things coming up and one that had happened last Friday. Some of us went on a field trip to New School of Design in San Diego, and they really, it was more than just rolling out the red carpet. They had different division leaders, if you will. So the head of the architecture program, the head of construction management spoke to us, and we got a tour of the facility, including their wood shop. We should just say their shop, because they had a 3D printer that you could have walked into almost, which was very cool. And they talked about how integrated their program is, which makes it pretty easy as far as cross-pollination. If you want to minor in something, like major in architecture and do a minor in interior architecture, or want to just simply take some classes in construction management, all those things are diversely available. Cost, because I never knew what their cost was or is, and it's basically about 10,000 a quarter. They're on a quarter system, so you could look at that as being 30,000 a year. Private school, so it's up there, still not SC or SciArc, anything like that. So it is another option. So I think we're going to vow to go at least once a year on a trip down there to see that, to have our students check it out. So I just advise all students that are considering higher education moving forward to start to look at your different options by visiting these schools, and try and do so before school years close out, which vary from place to place. Being that they're in the quarter system, they're not over yet, as opposed to USC had graduation last Friday and their thesis reviews, or really all of their reviews, happened like 2 weeks ago, which is another event. We actually visited USC week before last and saw the graduate students' thesis work. And one of the administrators gave us a very extensive and comprehensive discussion on how you can transfer, what you would need to do. And we even talked about potentially having another workshop, which is what they did for students that were applying, a workshop on portfolio development and stuff. So that's already a great liaison collaboration we have with USC. But certainly these other bridges can be made with Cal Poly Pomona, which now we have ECC students that are getting ready to go to those two schools to name, and that's the ones I know. I know students going to SC, and I know at least one student going to Cal Poly Pomona. I know a student going to ASU. So certainly all of you guys out there, as you do get acceptance at different places, we ask that you let us know so we can definitely make our student body aware and share that with your classmates to let them know why you chose it, what you know about it. And we would be just happy and over the moon if you guys would come back and visit us one way or the other, virtually or something, to tell us how your experiences are going at those different institutions so we can bring other students into that fold, or at least know their options. All right. So there's that. Another upcoming event that I'm trying to forge getting done is a tour of a project at ECC under construction. So I'm working with one of the lead construction managers on campus to see if we can fit that in before the semester ends. So stay tuned. It will be a kind of a limited quantity of people that can go on that, probably about 20. But that's undoubtedly going to be a Friday, like a late Friday afternoon. But the idea would be to see a building, as I like to say, is half baked or 3/4 baked, where you could see it almost fully under construction, but see what's going on under it there, to see structure and suspended ceilings and mechanical systems and all that sort of stuff. It should be a great opportunity to see one or two buildings. So look out for those. For those that have not joined the Art Club Discord, you should really join that, because it makes it really easy for us to get information to you and for you to ask questions of us. We'd like to start to break away from the email, because we don't have everybody's, and it becomes really easy to give you information if you join that Discord. If you don't know what that link is and how to do it, just reach out to myself or any of the faculty, and at least they'll direct you to somebody that could tell you what that Discord link is and how to join. And another thing you should know, with all of these lectures that have been set up and done, many of them are on YouTube already. So if you go to YouTube and do a search on, I'll put it in the chat, ECC space Art Club, you will find many of the lectures that have been presented already, that you can go back and get them as well, see on demand, as well as a couple of architecture club meetings that were really where we had some great guests come in. We had one time where a Woodbury student told us about getting into Woodbury and the iPal program and all of those sort of things. We had another young man that had recently graduated from USC's graduate program and talked about that. So a lot of those different presentations are there on YouTube. So there you go. Those are the main announcements, and Adaeze is coming in a couple of minutes here. If you are in one of the ECC classes and are striving to get a little extra credit for being in attendance, make sure you put in the chat your name and what class or classes you are in. And I'll get that to the right sources.
No, you won't. What you need to do if you're in my classes is take a few notes. You saw what I wrote to you, and plan to have a little discussion about that at our next class gathering tomorrow morning, tomorrow 1 o'clock, or next Monday at 5:30. And you all know who you are. I've been checking out your names and writing them down. Felt like Santa Claus here, finding out who's been good. Ruben, one last question real quick. On your trip to San Diego to New School, did you see any of our former students?
No, we saw very few students at the time. Yeah, so I didn't see any.
I think next time we go to SC or to any of these places, we should contact. We'll do that anyway. I know it's time. I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation. So I'll turn it back to you. Thanks.
There we go. So thank you much, but certainly with respect to what Dan just asked there, certainly as things are going in Adaeze's presentation, make note or just simply put in the chat any questions you have. I'll grab them and field them so she can answer a few questions after the presentation is over. So think of some good ones and have that ready to roll. And Adaeze is here, and we're going to let her do a takeover. And there we go. So without further ado, I'm going to let Adaeze really kind of fully announce herself and tell you a little bit about her and all her work.
Yes, yes. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can.
Nice. Sometimes my audio gets wonky going from home to work and back again. So glad you all can hear me. Hi, my name is Adaeze Cadet. I'm the design principal at HO+K. I'm going to be giving you a presentation that is going to be focusing on a little bit about me, talking about my design approach and how I approach projects, giving you some case studies to show that in process, as well as a few portfolio items and a little bit about our HO+K LA office. So feel free to drop messages in the chat, raise your hand. I want this to be interactive. And so with that, I will get the presentation going. All right. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Sacramento, California. I have a twin sister who stayed as far away from architecture as possible. She's in the DEI space, and two lovely younger brothers. My father is from Haiti, and he's an international lawyer that became a diplomat. And so at a very young age, you can see in the upper right here, or upper left here, we were traveling, and I think that's what kind of got me into the architecture bug. Became obsessed with blocks and Legos, and still obsessed with them. As you can see here, this is a random Legoland in Westchester, New York, that I made everyone stop and let me go out and take some pictures. And so then when I was 9 years old, that's when I really decided I wanted to pursue architecture, and started getting all these books and reading up on it. My mom was one of my biggest mentors. She really supported me, again, getting me the books, getting me all the Lego sets. My sister would play with me with Legos and help kind of foster that creation, that idea about creating space and manipulating space. And then one of my biggest mottos is what Beyonce do. I'm actually wearing Ivy Park now. I'm a big fan of hers, her drive, the way that she's constantly reinventing herself. I use that kind of same logic as I'm applying it to the different projects I'm working on. And I also love to sew in my spare time. In the lower right, you can see I recreated one of her outfits for Halloween, which is really fun, off of a few of the pictures. And I also compete in IIDA, which stands for the International Interior Design Association. They do an annual competition with all firms around the LA area, and we make outfits out of upholstery fabric and things that really shouldn't be clothing. And that is a picture of us winning first place and best in show. So that's a lot of fun. And that's another creative outlet for me. So I love all things design. I'm obsessed with designing. And that's kind of what's made me continue with my career. So leading with that, kind of want to give you an overview of my design approach and how I like to approach the projects that I work on. And I apply this approach with my studio at HO+K. So first, when we start thinking about a project, it's really important to understand all the project stakeholders and everything that can be affecting this project. And so we have the client, who may or may not be the user in a building. So if you think about like a hospital type of project, usually the hospital is the client and also the user, because they have their various user groups that come in and they're actually holding on to the property. Another example might be if you think of like a multifamily project, that's where we usually are working with the developer, who's the client. And then the users, what we would categorize as the users, are the people that are actually renting the apartments, or if they're condos, they're buying them. And so how do they experience the space and experience the building? We also like to think about the community, how that fits in. Every project that my firm does is actually landing itself in a community. And so how is this project going to impact them? Are there ways that we can give back to the community? Maybe look at some ways to incorporate some needs that the community didn't have before into the project. You're going to see an example of that in one of the case studies. And then thinking about the co-creators. And so that, along with us being the architect, we have the contractor that we worked with, the different types of consultants. You've got MEP, which stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And I'm going to try to actually explain a lot of the acronyms because we start throwing them around a lot. And I remember being an intern and like, what is that? Who does that? What is that? What is an RFI? Which is a request for information. But there's a lot of acronyms, so I'm gonna try to slow down and actually explain a lot of that. But when we're working with mechanical, electrical, and engineering, different types of engineering sub-consultants that are involved in the project, they have a say, they have a stake in this project. And then also thinking about how this project is going to affect the environment. Our buildings have a big carbon footprint. We try to minimize that as much as possible, and look at ways that maybe even the building can help give back with green energy, having elements of biophilia, and thinking about the overall environment of the project. And so it's important to do all those things so that we gain a clear understanding from the beginning about what the objectives are for the project. It helps to improve communication, knowing who's got what role and all getting together in the beginning. It helps improve equity in a project. You may be designing something that's a project that's based maybe in, say, a more just depressed community. That might mean we want to have more community benefits in a project versus, say, a project that's in a more affluent area where there's lots of green space and they may not need certain things, but we want to look at all the stakeholders to really start to level set the equity across all the different people involved in the project. And then using all of that information to use that for goal setting. So we really want to use this, use the information we get from our stakeholders to help us set goals for the project. Another aspect of how we approach design is understanding what we call the nature of place. And so that's actually a report out on really where is the site, what is it doing, what is it affecting. This is actually one of the guys actually at my older firm was great at sketching all of this stuff really quickly and getting all the ideas out in the open. We would typically meet with all the stakeholders to do this kind of brain dump about all the things that create the place in which this project is going to live. And we do that because context matters. You're not going to design a building the same way in LA that you would in New York, that you would in, say, Ohio. And so really understanding all the drivers and how this project is going to be affecting the space that we're building in helps to shape the overall concept and design for the project. And it increases the potential to have a holistic design. And so again, thinking about what we're doing, what we're affecting, getting it all down, knowing all of the opportunities to improve things, the challenges that surround a project, helps to give us a framework to kind of narrow down and focus in on the best solution for a project. The next part of the project that's super important is defining the project vision. And so that's kind of like the big mission statement for the project, or it may be in some of your studios, you refer to it as a thesis statement, like what's the why behind what we're doing. And then, oops. And then from that, we like to pull out our guiding principles that are measurable. So it can't be just, it needs to be cool, because that, cool can be defined in so many different ways by so many different people. So they want to be measurable goals, like creating a clean framework to allow creativity to flourish, something that can be measurable, that you can actually look back to and make sure you're tracking it. Use it as an opportunity from the beginning to bake in sustainability. Sometimes you'll find when you get out into the workplace that sustainability sometimes is a green sticker or a Band-Aid that gets put on the end that can easily be taken off. And so it's important when we're coming up with these initial concepts, when we're citing the building, that we're thinking about sustainability, we're thinking about how the sun's moving around a project to help us cite where that building wants to live. And that's something that can be a passive strategy that maybe your client may not, it's an easier pill for your client to swallow because it's not directly tied to cost. Unfortunately, in the real world, you have to think about costs, and kind of miss that in school about just designing crazy stuff that you never had to think about a budget, but we do in the real world. So it's nice to bake in sustainability so it won't get cut out. And then testing, test concepts against the guiding principles. So again, we do that at the beginning, we set the guiding principles, but they're not meant to sit on the shelf to never be seen again. We want to keep pulling those out, keep measuring our design decisions against those guiding principles. Are they supporting that? Is that a better way to get that one, say, principle more pronounced on the project, but always going back to it and using it as a yardstick to guide us throughout the whole process. And then, oh geez, let's stop clicking. Welcome feedback. That's a really important one. I know in school you have crits, you get feedback from your colleague, from your, not colleagues, but from your classmates. And that's something that's super important to even just test your ideas, bounce ideas off each other. And that's something I carry into my studio at HOK, is for us to just pin stuff up on the wall, welcome the feedback. And I like to say, like, if I'm looking at something and my concept is that it's red for simplicity's sake, and I present it to a teammate and I look at it and they're like, it looks blue to me. Well, then that tells me that something isn't translating across. No matter how much I believe it's red, that person thinks it's blue. So then I need to retool or think about it, think about those guiding principles, shift the design around, and then come back to them and present it. And I say, it's red. And then they're like, oh, it's purple. Like, okay, we're getting closer to blue. So there's a lot of a feedback loop that you have to do in the design process. And so it's good for you to get comfortable with taking in that criticism, not taking it personal, and just looking at it as an opportunity to strengthen your design, to strengthen your concept, to get it to read stronger, so that there's no confusion in the intent behind the project. And lastly, leverage technical knowledge. Again, I'm sure you're learning that buildings are super complicated. There's a lot of life safety around that. You're shaping the environment. And so there's a lot of technical knowledge that's there that can help inform a design early on in the process, so that you're not kind of getting stuck with something that actually physically can't be built. And so kind of circling back a little bit and defining an example of a nature of place study, there's usually key areas of focus that we like to focus on for this report. One of those being site and placemaking, kind of understanding where the project is, how the climate is affecting the project. So again, if you're designing in different cities, or it may be something that's in an urban environment that's going to be different than if it's out in an open field, understanding the constraints around that, understanding the neighborhood fabric, what's around the building that could be used as an asset, that might be, say, an obstacle that you need to kind of move around, understanding the people that are making up that neighborhood fabric. Understanding the opportunities to improve energy efficiency, to lower and reduce our carbon footprint, looking at health and well-being, how the building can be used to help improve that with the users. Looking at equity, seeing where disparities are within either the community or within the users, and making sure that you're building that into the project. And then thinking about the boundaries, like what are the constraints with the project? When you get out to the real world and start practicing, there's lots of constraints over how you can build something. There's height and bulk requirements, there's city codes, really understanding what those, I should say, guide rails are, and the kind of codes that you need to follow will also help influence the project. And those vary by place and site by site, city by city. And so kind of pulling out a few of those topics, giving you some examples. This is based on a project that was in Austin, Texas. And so really trying to understand the neighborhood fabric. And so we'll ask ourselves questions like, what are the opportunities to provide value to the community beyond the property line? And this is kind of looking beyond the site, but actually the surrounding areas, how it affects the community, how people are going to be arriving to the site, the different opportunities, access to public transit, things like that. And then moving on to looking at the energy and carbon factors that you can, help to improve the energy efficiency, to reduce the carbon footprint for our projects. Buildings are, there's a lot of energy involved in getting a building from start to finish. And so thinking about ways to improve that and understanding, what's the appropriate energy use intensity, or what we refer to a lot as EUI target for the project. Understanding passive technologies, that goes back to baking and sustainability in the beginning, and also kind of setting those targets and metrics so that you have something that is measurable, that you can make sure you're hitting those targets and improving your building from the baseline. Looking at energy and waste recycling, different cities had different requirements for that. So how does that affect your project? Are there some, in this particular case, the city had some waste diversion goals, which were important for us to understand, because a project usually starts at the very beginning, inception, once we get signed up, and then it can be 18 months, 2 years, 5 years before the project actually goes through completion. So a lot can change during that time. And then the building will, continue to be used for years after that. So it's important to understand what those future goals are so we can future-proof the design and make sure that it will be able to hit those targets throughout time. Another area is renewable energy. And for this particular project, what was interesting is we looked at different ways to provide renewable energy to the project. And based on this actual location, wind was actually the best way and most efficient way to create energy on the site, as opposed to, say, solar or biomass. Ways to bake in equity, understanding that there's disparities across the communities that we build in. People come from different backgrounds, people have different needs, different ways that they even think about space. We've talked about at our firm neurodiversity, and so even based on that, there's different ways that people experience space. And so thinking about that and thinking about the demographic within the neighborhood that you're building in. And so looking at population growth, which can affect how the building's designed, how many, say for a hospital project, how many beds do you need to plan for based on that community and the community's growth. Looking at the racial makeup and the gender makeup and seeing how that could possibly influence the project. Should this building consider any particular demographic shifts in the long term, such as diversity or aging? If you have more of an aging population, then maybe you think about having even going beyond the accessibility ramps and wider corridors. You think about what those needs are for that particular demographic and try to bring some of those elements into the design. And then looking at the economic backgrounds as well, because that can affect kind of the type of projects that you're designing. If you're designing for a very wealthy community, it may look a little different than, say, a community that's a little more disadvantaged. Like, for example, we wouldn't want to design something that looks like, usually in those type of communities, the project budget's really small, but we have to be mindful of the fact that people are going to be inhabiting it. You don't want to do these tiny punch hole windows. You don't want to mixed use family development project in a developing area to feel like a jail or anything like that. So you want to have it be bright, still include lots of light, have lots of inviting colors to help uplift the community and not be like an instrument that's, just a kind of a cheap cookie cutter building. You still want to give them a high level of design for those types of areas. So what does this look like in practice? So I'm going to go into a couple of case studies here. This is a project called Robertson Lane Hotel. It is located in West Hollywood. It's right near the corner of Robertson and Santa Monica. So if you're familiar with West Hollywood, all the fun bars and shops are down this street. And then this is kind of where there's a lot of kind of their Their design district is over here with like really cool furniture stores. So it's a nice area, nice part of town, and starts to become even a gateway into West Hollywood. And so one of the ways that we put into place our nature of place study was looking at the community and trying to understand how people move around the site. And what currently is happening was that this is a really gigantic long block. It's bigger than a city block. It's actually almost 3 normal city blocks long. And so we wanted to provide a way to cut through the site to provide continuity and a nice pedestrian experience, because Santa Monica Boulevard can get a little busy. So providing this nice pedestrian access through the existing park that was being expanded towards Robertson, which I think that's complete now. This project is currently under construction. And then providing that pedestrian access through the block, so you don't have to go all the way around this long block, and then connecting down to some future development. One of the other things that's important to this site is that we wanted the project to really celebrate the history of the site and the fact that it is in WeHo. It is this building here that you're seeing on the right-hand side is an existing prefabricated building called the Factory. It's a historic building, and so we wanted to create a design that celebrated the history of the project. And then you're also seeing how that paseo cuts through the block and gives pedestrian access through and across to the other side of the site. This is looking at the different ways that we baked in sustainability. The project's going for LEED Gold. We did lots of energy modeling. We looked at the way the sun moves around the site. That informed the fenestration in the building. In the middle here is a LEED checklist card where we target different points to see if we are able to achieve it. And we make sure that's monitored throughout the process, and really taking this data and using it to inform the design. And so going back to that, the factory building here, the history of it is a Mitchell camera factory. And so they actually made motion picture cameras in it. It's a prefabricated building, so it can actually be taken apart and disassembled. And it later became an iconic nightclub called the Factory. It has a very big history and prominence within the LGBTQ community. It was one of the few places where they could go and feel safe, and it is a historic building. And so what we proposed to do was to actually disassemble the building and rotate it on the site. Oops. And so here's kind of an exploded axon of how that would happen. We take apart all the pieces, the exterior panels would be refinished. We'd use it as an opportunity to improve the energy efficiency within the building. We would reuse the flooring, reuse a lot of the interior elements. We would leave this, the truss structure exposed, but really taking the building that's kind of was perpendicular to the street and rotating it 90 degrees so that it has a much more prominent face on the building. So these are some final renderings for the project. Again, it's in construction right now. This is on the Lapeer side. This is the main hotel entrance. So the hotel actually enters on the more quiet street. And this was in conjunction with the traffic study and trying to understand how people would be circulating around the site. So that's the main drop off where you go down into the parking garage. And then you can see through the paseo. So this is looking back east towards the newly expanded park across the street from our project. We activated the paseo by adding lots of retail space along the ground floor, encouraging more pedestrian traffic within this area and kind of bringing people down from Santa Monica down and then through to our site. And then here's a view off of Robertson. So if you're very familiar with the area, the Abbey is actually literally right across the street here. So you can see there's lots of retail that's kind of inviting you in, and you can see the prominence of the factory now that we've rotated 90 degrees, and it's actually elevated on a concrete plinth, and it has a commemorative space that actually celebrates the history of the building. And that's another view from Lapeer. The hotel is going to have great views of the Hollywood Hills, which would be nice. And then working on this project, again, you can see the prominence now of the factory building. We also added a lot of green and biophilia. So thinking about health, well-being into the space, lots of green walls. You can see in the surrounding areas, there's not a lot of parks that are nearby. So we wanted to make this feel like a green, inviting space. And then while working on this project with the client, they decided to have us compete for this site here on the edge. And they had spoken to lots of different architecture firms. They had lots of people come up with ideas. They said they had over 70 ideas. I came up with a few ideas. We talked through it and we were awarded the project. And so that project site on the corner is a retail, 2 stories of retail, 1 level below grade speak easy, and then another level below that for storage to support the hotel. And so it was nice to be able to design 2 projects next to each other. And they really wanted this project to be a gateway, as I was mentioning earlier, into kind of the main street of West Hollywood, where all the nice bars and clubs and restaurants are here along this way. And then it also is a gateway point into West Hollywood Design District area. And so that's kind of where the nice retail stores are, and there's like furniture stores and some really chic kind of restaurants. Craig's, I think, is over here, as well as Gracias Madre, which I love because I'm a vegetarian. And so using, they wanted this design to be something that's iconic that leads into this gateway. And so through this process, they said, iconic design. So they had a bit of a vision of what they wanted, and came up with 5 different ways to kind of pursue this project. And so the first one was kind of looking at it and taking inspiration from the design district that it's close to, looking at the ways of different fabrics, how they could layer on top of each other. And so this one I called the veil, where you're kind of shrouding the building, lifting up the corner to be inviting to let people come into the retail space at the ground floor. This one plays on form and how kind of you have this intersection of people and communities coming together within West Hollywood. And so how do you bend that, twist that, and manifest that into a shape? And then the crystal was more about a slight play on the rainbow, having lots of different colors, creating this, again, an iconic form. That was their main driver for the project. And bringing in color and making it feel like kind of this sparkling jewel that's marking the front door of West Hollywood. And then also looking at this idea of it being kind of this glass conservatory, adding lots of green, because as I mentioned, there's not a lot of green space outside of the park. And so having that kind of bleed into the space. And the final concept we came up with, which actually was the first, so it's kind of great that they picked the first one, was an idea of a bird cage. And so this is playing on Lake Adaeze Falls. This is talking about kind of how being a marker and taking an iconic form, making it feel a lot more open, using the tree in the middle, which was going to be a sculptural element that ties into longevity and growth and transformation, all the things that are super important to this community, and using this form as the marker for the kind of corner gateway experience. And so here's kind of some inspiration images that I looked at that helped me kind of create the form. I'm wanting it to be kind of more clean, modern. We talked about adding lights. Because again, this is a gateway, and this is where they used to, hopefully they'll have it again, have lots of parades, Pride, as well as the Halloween parade that comes down here. And so it could be, the colors could change. It could have a second life when these big events are coming on. And this is, you can see kind of the edge of the Abbey here. And the beautiful thing about this project is because we won the project, the Robertson Lane Hotel first, and this one second, we could look at this project as a whole and how these projects would still have their unique identity, but still tied together and bringing over the industrial elements of the factory, celebrating that with kind of the 2-story space on the back end of the project. The next project that I'm going to highlight here is Community Culture Campus. And so this one was a super fun project. It's with Community Culture Records. It's started by Philip Lawrence, who is Bruno Mars's right-hand man. And he wanted to create a creative office space that had recording studios in it, as well as a soundstage area that would really kind of be in the heart of Hollywood. And so when we were working on the project, again, studying the nature of place, thinking about all of the things that inform this project. We take inspiration from the Hollywood Hills. This was started at the end of 2020. So thinking about us being in the middle of a pandemic, what does return to office really look like? Wanted to make sure every floor had access to outdoor space. We incorporated elements of biophilia. And then also realizing that, again, this is a pretty urban dense area. There's not a lot of public space. In all the schemes that we did, we always had a public park that would be accessible by the public. And so you're seeing this elevated park that could also have performances in this band shell. And so for that project, it was a competition. And so we created what is called a, well, they send out an RFP, which is a request for proposal. And so we have to put together a proposal on what we would want this project to be. And so understanding the stakeholders, understanding who this client was, from the very beginning, we started thinking about, okay, we know this is for, you know, people in the music biz, what would they want to see? And so we went and deviated from our standard package and really wanted this to feel like almost, I might be dating myself, but the insert of a CD, or you could say an album cover, or thinking about it as, you know, from a music perspective instead of just a typical architecture proposal. And so we had this slide, which we called AOD, which was Album of the Day. And it was riffing on something that kind of came out of the pandemic. A way for our office to stay connected is people would take turns sending out an album of the day. And so we could all like kind of listen to it while we're working from home and still feel connected. And so we brought that into our project. We had a selection of hits for them to listen to. We outlined the table of contents as today's mix, tracks and playlists. We even revamped our headshots to be a little more artistic, as if they were individual album covers, and just really kind of playing on the idea of like, what would a music executive like to see? And we came up with 3 different concepts. This is one of the concepts. This is a kind of showing what level of design that we put into the package. We looked at all the stacking with the program and how the program would lay across the sites. We also looked at, again, with that nature of play study, what we could do to give back into the community. And so Hollywood High School is actually right across the street. It's performance arts. A performance arts high school. And so we wanted there to be some connection to the project where in some type of community space where you could actually be fostering young talent and getting them excited to one day actually work in this building. And so we were successful. We won the project. It was very exciting. And this was Community Culture's first development project. So you're going to see when you get into the workforce that you have really sophisticated developers, you have young novice ones, you need to figure out kind of how much help they need. And so this one with Community Culture is their first development project. And so I created a visioning session for them virtually, because mind you, this is still in COVID, virtually, to kind of help them figure out their ideas and how they wanted to create a vision statement and guiding principles for the project. So we talked about, you know, what their purpose is, their aspirations. We wanted to outline the what they defined as the criteria for success. Because really, this is about us getting all on the same page, clearly defining the scope, what all are the moving parts within a project. That's what we refer to when we say the scope of the project. And then also understanding their existing facility, what's working, what's not working, what can we improve upon in this project, starting to pull out some of the goals for the projects. Here you're seeing the line for the stakeholders where we wanted to, you know, define, okay, who in the client, okay, it's just community culture. They're going to occupy the building. And then thinking about who, you know, the users are, who's actually going to be coming here, thinking about tourists, you're going to have audience because there's a performance venue, thinking about the community, how it ties into Hollywood. You know, the environment, are we going for LEED? Are we going for, different types of energy certifications? Do we want to try to target net zero for the project? And then, you know, outlining who our co-creators are for the different engineers that we would be working with. And through this process, coalescing it down, we pulled out some ideas that were really resonating with the client, and we came up with a vision statement and guiding principles. And so for this project, our vision statement was a love language to LA, or love song to LA, which is great because it's a music industry. So a love song to LA, establishing the destination for artist creation. Community Culture Campus bridges the history of Hollywood to the future of entertainment, offering the industry a creative home. And so they were really focusing on creating a community for creatives. They really wanted it to be representation of Hollywood and like the ideal Hollywood, because Hollywood has its ups and downs, but really the idea of what Hollywood is, and really kind of match that, because I think sometimes people go to Hollywood and they have a vision of what it is and they get there like not quite. So they really wanted this to be like the future thinking of what Hollywood can be in its greatest. And then from that, we pulled out the guiding principles. We wanted to bridge art and commerce with authenticity and integrity, blur the space between artist and audience. They really wanted people to get a peek into how artists function. And so we had some elements where you could actually look into recording spaces, really embrace Hollywood as a global destination, foster connections, amplify chance encounters, discover a place where all people can be inspired and feel comfort. They really wanted, because this company is Black owned, they really wanted to also focus on equity within their space and making sure that everyone would feel welcome and nobody would feel like they're on the outside looking in. And then bringing in, and then engaging the community and amplifying vibrancy and resiliency. So actually looking at ways to connect with the community, and then creating that oasis, creating that green space as a gift back to the community. And so this is an example of how we test our design philosophies, how we're laying out the project, different adjacencies. And so we did persona mapping because we have lots of different types of users within community culture. We have recording artists, we have performers, we have creative office space users that are going to be using this space, as well as retail. And as you can see here, the connection to the Hollywood High School. And so there will be students using the space as well. And so how do all these people circulate, move to the buildings? We tested a few things. We had to move a few areas around to make it work, to make sure, an artist coming to perform has a direct access up there, or they can, be around other people if they want. But this was a tool, a visual tool for us to communicate to the client how people will be moving through their space to get their sign off on the adjacencies. And so here's some renderings of the project. You can see we lifted up the corner. This is that lecture space that's right on the corner. So it's inviting people to come into the space. It had these big pivot doors. And then we also incorporated into the scan elements from looking at mid-century modern, which is a very prominent style within Hollywood. So we wanted to tie that in with these kind of arched and fluted elements. We added LEDs so that from a distance, it could create an image. So that is tying into kind of the future thinking of it. Here's a view up on the public park where we have a band shell here. So this, the design for this is actually supposed to be telescopic. I'm not sure that's going to fully be in their budget, but it could be something that could, lay down so you could get great views to the west from it. And then also have performances. You could come out here and do yoga in the middle of the day. You can see there's access on every single floor to outside to green space. And then we designed this, this cylindrical elevator, thinking about, again, equity. So we have stairs that take you all the way up, but we wanted to have an equally cool area for people that are disabled that would be able to go up the 5 stories of stairs. And so there's a really cool glass elevator that can take you up to the space as well. And so moving on from those case studies, I just wanted to kind of quickly go through my portfolio. One of the things that Ruben and I talked about is that I'm an architect by trade, but I've flexed into interiors. And so that's something that is a nice, it's probably why I did architecture versus interiors, because I kind of wanted to be a bit of a Frank Lloyd Wright and do like all of it and the architecture. And I don't know, maybe I'm a little OCD of a designer, but that was always the thing that I love, like designing the smallest things to the biggest things. And so with architecture, you can actually do that. And you can actually go into interior design if you want to. You could go into product design. You could go into industrial design, because you have that design thinking that can translate into those different industries. And so some of the work that I've done is the Edition Hotel, which is located on Sunset and Doheny. It is a kind of a Z-shaped building. You'll see that in the plan. It was designed in conjunction with John Pawson's office, and it being an Edition Hotel, Marriott is the operator for the hotel. And so it's a little convoluted on this project because we had the developer, so that's our client, but we also had the hotel operator, which is Marriott, so that's kind of also our client. And then we were partnering with John Pawson's office, and then Ian Schrager's office is the hotelier, and so they're in charge of the brand standards for a hospitality project. So we had a lot of voices moving around in this project. I'm really glad it got built and got over the finish line, but it was very interesting to have to design with all those different voices. The lower floors are the hotel, and then there's 4 levels on the top that are which are the condos. So there's 20 condos on this project, and it's a 190 key hotel. And we say keys because you can have a standard room, or you can have a presidential suite that may have 2 to 3 rooms inside of it. And so we don't really go by rooms, it's kind of just by keys. So that's the hotel jargon. Oops, I keep going backwards here. And so you can see here in the plan, the kind of Z-shaped building. The building steps down towards Harat, the street. Sunset is at the top, and then Doheny's here on the left-hand side. And so the building actually steps down. And because of the stepping and the way that this project was designed, this was, again, a collaborative effort. It was designed from the outside in, and usually hotels, because the module is so important, are usually designed more so from the inside out. So you kind of stay on your module for the different units. Some, 2 modules will make a suite, and that's really important to the efficiency and how directly tied to the revenue for the project. And so this project was the opposite. And so we started out with 5 guest room types, from a standard, king, double, junior suite. What do we call, I forget what we called the second suite. And then we had the presidential suites with 2 suite options. And because of the stepping and because of how the building was shaped, we ended up with 47 different types. And so Pawson designed 5, I designed 42 of them. We used Revit throughout the whole process. So that was super helpful for us to do all these different types of guest rooms. Here on the bottom, you're seeing a 3D model that was done in Revit of the check-in desk area. And here's like some studies that we did on the canopy when you come into the space. But a lot of work goes into how this whole building evolves, and you just kind of have to take it day by day. But a lot of information ultimately gets put into the drawing set. Here's some finished views of the project. This is the main lobby area, and this was originally designed to be a frame overlooking to the south of the project. But there is a apartment building that sticks over here that isn't really that pretty to look at. So instead, we added a green wall here to kind of be that backdrop. So you're coming in, you're seeing the green wall, which nicely plays on the curtains and the little pops of color in a more neutral background. We used warm woods in the more public spaces. And then in the guest rooms, we went with a larch, which is a lighter wood. This is some custom furniture. This was designed by Pawson's office. And we did a wood headboard along the end, and you get these nice views back to the Hollywood Hills. This is a view here of one of the condos. So we had these wraparound balconies and these sliding screens, and you get nice views down to downtown. And then here's the Ardmore. It's on the ground floor. It's the restaurant. And so it's similar vocabulary that you saw for the reception desk was carried in through to the restaurant area. And there's actually, which I don't think I put an exterior shot here, but there's wood slats on the exterior of the ballroom, which is just above it. And we brought those wood slats in and they became the ceiling on the inside space. So you kind of get this idea of this wood box that's sitting on this glass base. And then this is the ballroom, which I know does not look like a ballroom because it's a dual function space. So kind of understanding the needs of the community. They have a lot of, it being in West Hollywood, there's a lots of movie showings in the area, and there wasn't enough in that area to support that. And so we designed the ballroom to actually have telescopic chairs and soundproof panels that come out to actually create this box in which you can actually have movie premieres within it. Another project is another hospitality project. This is in Chula Vista, California. It is quite large. It's 1.7 million square feet, 1,600 keys. So again, that's ranging from the king all the way up to the presidential suite. So it's 1,600 keys. It's delayed a little bit because of COVID. So I think it might be completed in 25 now. But I was the designer for this project. We took inspiration, it's right on the edge of the water, which you can see here in this lower view, kind of took inspiration from the form of a bird. So you kind of have these wings that open up that kind of maximize the views from all the mini guest rooms. And then it has a large convention center that's over here on the base and the podium. And then part of Gaylord's brand, so that's the operator of the hotel, so that's one of the client arms, is to have this big atrium space. And so that's what you're seeing here. We did an ETFE roof, and so it creates this nice big space where each one of their products, they wanted to feel rooted in the locale. So we kind of played on this inside out. So we have lots of lush landscape inside in this atrium space. So you kind of come in and have your wow moment. And we even tucked in the fitness center up here. So you're actually looking out into the water while you're on a treadmill, which is pretty cool. The next project is the Bellevue Hotel and Residences up in Bellevue, Washington. This one was 2.5 million square feet. It was 245 keys and 231 units. On this project, I was responsible for designing the exterior of the building, as well as the interior architecture for the individual residences. And then we also worked with an interior designer who was in charge of FF&E. So fixtures, finishes, and equipment is what that stands for. And so she kind of came up with kind of the palette for the interior spaces. But our team, we laid out each individual room. We figured out where, the bathrooms, the kitchens, all those adjacencies going with the different types, how the balconies would go into that. And then there's a nice amenity space up at the top. Huh, that's fun. Okay, computer might restart. The next one here, these are pictures looking at the inside. And so on the upper two images are of the hotel component, which was the lower 13 floors. And so this is in the main lobby. We took inspiration from it being a lake house. There's a really big lake up in the Bellevue, Washington area. And so it's this deconstructed lake house. It's kind of the stairs are almost as if you took a pier and you kind of split it and made it a 3D object, using lots of imagery that kind of gives you the idea of the lakes and the ocean. That's also there too. And then in contrast, the residential portion was a lot more warmer and brighter. So it has its own separate lobby here on the bottom left. And then here's a view from the kitchen, which has a tremendous view, but really looking at kind of clean lines, lots of warmth on the residential side to contrast the kind of more moody hotel portion. And so this was a project that I did up in San Francisco when we were growing our interiors practice, our commercial interiors practice. And so this is for Constellation Wine Brands. It was a 50,000 square foot, 2-story project within the Levi building, which is actually designed by my current company, HO+K. And so they took 2 floors. We really wanted to have this connecting stair to make it feel uniform. We did some change management. So they went from an office that was very high cubicles, everyone was really closed in, to transition into a much more open collaborative space. Even the CEO was out on the ground floor. So we wanted it to feel light, bright. We took inspiration from Sonoma and wine country. This wall here is actually created out of wine barrels. It actually had a little bit of a wine smell to it, which is kind of cool. We did a cork on the bottom here, tying into the cork. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it created a nice texture here in this connecting stair between the two levels. And then we took some kind of colors again from Sonoma and used that to brighten up the space and add pops of color. This is a project in San Francisco as well. This is 50 UM Plaza. This was a historical renovation project. And so this was very interesting because there's parts of the projects that has to stay the same and you can't change it because of the historical history of the history of the project and the importance of the project. And so this was with GSA, and it's very exciting. It's a LEED Platinum building. And so we got a lot of points for the adaptive reuse. It also had a seismic retrofit component. And so we looked at ways to bake in sustainability into that and synergies there. So you can see here on the upper left, we actually created these shear walls and then provided openings so that we're actually venting and providing passive cooling through these almost chimneys, if you will. And so that's a way to kind of, we had an eco charrette. And so that's something in the very beginning where we get all the stakeholders in a room, we talk about what our targets are. And I think without that charrette, we probably would not have hit LEED Platinum, but we looked at ways to provide these synergies to make the design more efficient. And so that was one of the ways that we're structurally reinforcing the building, but we're also looking at ways to bake in some passive cooling in the project. We had the operable windows, we maintained those. We looked at ways to bring in daylight into the corridors because they're really dark and dank. And so we opened them up working with the historical preservation architect. So that's another aspect you could pursue. There's lots of architecture firms that just focus on historical renovations. And so we worked with them and used their expertise to understand what was important, what could be elevated. This image here is the main lobby. We kept it pretty much untouched. We just refinished certain areas. And then because it's a GSA building, a government building, we had to have an X-ray scanner as well as a little detector to go in. And so we actually cladded the X-ray scanner in the matching limestone for the project. I thought that was kind of a nice way to make it go away and not be such an eyesore in the beautiful space. Then I had the fun task of designing for architects, which can be terrifying. So this was actually the second time I had the opportunity to do that, to design HKS's current San Francisco location. It is a warehouse building, and we looked at ways that actually, this is the first project that deviated from HKS's standards because we wanted it to be a cooler space. And so we made it a cooler space. And so we thought about us being the user. So that was a little interesting because our user group is us. So we brainstormed a lot about how we use our current space, what can be improved in it, and how to best utilize the space on the ground floor of this converted factory. So here's some SketchUp views on the top of it, and then kind of similar shots in real life. So we stayed pretty true to the design. And we were able to kind of upgrade the space, but celebrate the nice, beautiful bones. We sandblasted the columns to expose that. We added these large fans because it's San Francisco and not every place has AC. So we had these larger fans to kind of support our air conditioning situation. And then we had one side where we did keep offices, but we wanted them to still bring a lot of natural light into the space. So even though they're on the glass, we had a lot of glass fronting the offices to make sure that light was able to penetrate into the space. And then here's our little break room area. This project is also in San Francisco. It's a 39-story tower. It's multifamily. It's 100% multifamily. This project had a very long journey. It started in 2007. And that was right before the market did that. And so it kind of went shelved for a while. And then another developer came in and bought it. And so then they wanted to have different targets. So then again, this goes back to understanding your client, what they really want. So the previous client wanted to do 217 units, and the new client wanted to do 320 units, but they didn't want to change the envelope because it was approved by the city already. So we had to do lots of jimmy rigging and changing things around to get everything to fit in. The previous owner did have 3 bedrooms. This owner was saying, okay, we'll just stick to 2 bedrooms, 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom and studios. And so we were able to retool the interior, modernize the facade. The original design had precast and they wanted it to feel like a more slick building. So we added in metal panel and played around with some of the proportions, but still staying within that entitled package. So if you're familiar with the San Francisco area, this is right at the base of the Bay Bridge, right when you come off on the first exit and come around. So it's pretty great to be able to see it. It has now been eclipsed by so many other towers, but it's always great when I drive and I'm like right here and I can see it. So it's pretty cool. So here's some views. It has an indoor-outdoor pool area here. And then some interior shots. This is the lobby, and then this is a rendering of one of the apartments. And then this was a science and technology project out in Sorrento Tech, which is a little north of San Diego. This was about 2.5 million square feet of lab space. And this was the first time that I even touched lab space. So, you know, that's fun to start out with something so massive, a little scary and terrifying, but made it work. We came up with a concept, again, looking at the surrounding area. It was really important for this client to differentiate itself from the other neighboring buildings. We came up with the concept of these machines on a mesa. There's actually a 60-foot difference between their upper property and then these 2 lower campuses, that they wanted it to feel unified. We actually used the parking garage as a way to transition that 60-foot grade drop. We looked at how people move to the site, how these sites can be connected, how you move through from the parking garages through the site down into the other parking garages. This is how we baked in the sustainability. We ran energy modeling throughout the process. And so we tweaked how the buildings were sited. We looked at ways to build in efficiency, adding PV panels, using the horizontal deeper shading along the south side. We have vertical shading to help with glazing on the east and west. And then the northern side of the property is pretty much open glass because you're getting your nice diffused natural northern light. And so here is a view kind of looking through and celebrating this amenity space that's on top of the parking garage. A lot of things that help this client differentiate it from its competitors is the amenity package. And so we really wanted to celebrate that in the scheme and kind of put it on this pedestal and jewel box for the project. And then allowing for lots of open space in between so people can have an active lifestyle while they're working on these really cool technologies in the science and technology building. So are there any questions there before I go into practice, or should I just keep going?
We can go either way. There were a few questions on the projects. I could pepper them in now.
Sure.
Let me see. Eric, you asked a question about very intrigued by the concept of neurodiversity that was mentioned early on. What research or data surveying methodologies were implemented that determines design?
Yes. So we have a really robust research and design group within HO+K. And so they've been doing various studies, looking at data. There's digesting data that exists. So there's certain colors that people respond to that help with people that are, say, that have various different, they have various different ailments. I don't want to say disabilities, but very different ways of how they process information. And so somebody that, say, is dyslexic may process colors, for example, differently than somebody else, and they may have a different response to it. It also speaks to how people work. And so thinking about how people that maybe need more heads down time, that get distracted from other things that need to focus, say if somebody has ADHD, like providing areas where they can have some kind of cooling down space, where they can be able to focus. And so we're actually using a lot of that information in our new space. We're actually moving from Culver to the Row, which actually you're seeing in the background here. And so as we're designing the space for ourselves, we want to provide flexibility for people who work in different ways into this corporate TI space. And so we have, our traditional desks, we have different areas that are out on the floor that have different type of seating, sitting high and low. We have different types of huddle rooms that'll be painted in different colors. We have individual phone booths too that are different colors to provide people the flexibility on how they work based on their different ranges of neurodiversity. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, wow, that was in depth. So questioning, kind of piggying back on that, the people that are doing those studies and stuff, they have backgrounds in sociology and different things, or are they?
Some are archaeologists, like, studying people behavior. A lot of it is coming out of also our workplace group. And so that also looks at how people work and interact with each other. And so a lot of it too is they've done some studies, but there's also a lot of disseminating other research that's out there and taking that information and trying to understand how that would translate into design and into how we design and shape our spaces. And so it's more translating data that exists rather than doing surveys. We do some, but a lot of it is taking data that already exists and then applying it to the built space.
Very interesting. So we're hearing that again, folks, because if people were at the first lecture of this semester, we had somebody from oh my goodness, RTKL, which Katie Sprague, which for all us ECC students, that's Peggy Johnson's sister, really dealt with the sociological and showed how it's tied to architecture, and what they were doing in their practice is kind of a similar thing. So another question, this was my question here, was in the community cultures building, office building, where is that in the timeline of architecture and construction? I mean, in the timeline of development.
Yeah, it's super early. They just I can finally talk about it. Did the big announcement about a month ago. And so they're in the entitlement process. And that is where we, create a package of the design. It gets presented to the city, and the city weighs in on if we're, meeting the height and bulk meaning like the size and kind of massing of the project. There's different constraints for that depending on where the building is located. We're following, meeting code, and they basically decide on if what we're doing kind of meets the intent of the strategic plan for that area. So it's in that phase right now of entitlements, and they're hoping that to get that done in the next. Unfortunately, LA, it takes a long time because there's lots of opinions and lots of voices, but they're hoping that will wrap up in the next 18 months, 2 years max. And then they will commence on doing the CDs, construction documents on the, so then they're going to start doing the design development drawings. So that's when we start adding and layering in more of the technical knowledge. And then we get into the construction documents of the project, and usually about 50, well, try not to do 50, but like to 75% of the construction documents, then that's when they put shovels in the ground. So they're estimating to be done with the project, hopefully by 2025, most likely it'll be 26.
And that is a piggyback question Eric had. As a prior educator in the neighborhood, he was, deeply touched by how Hollywood High is right across the street and is part of the project. So are other schools, including, he had stated here, Hollywood High, Bancroft Middle School, and other performing arts magnet programs, is there thought that they'll be able to utilize the space in some way or be a part of it?
Yeah, and it's so the school itself isn't technically involved in the project. We just wanted it to be an aspect of how the project is giving back to the community. So there's that immediate adjacency, but that lecture space is actually open to the community as a whole. And so there could be people that want to use that space to give a lecture, or there could be, you know, users within the building that want to use that lecture space, but it could be open up to different high schools, you know, to anywhere in LA that wants to have an event there in that space, and actually have that kind of proximity to other creatives in that industry.
And that was on the ground floor.
Yes.
At that entry space there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And so Yusef asked the question, how long did it take your team to create construction docs, construction drawings for the West Hollywood project?
West Hollywood project, we were doing, for that one, we had a little bit of a redesign, so it took a little bit longer. But I think the original plan was, I think 12 months for the construction documents from start to finish. So along that process, there's areas where we're getting permits as well. So for that one, we did a site permit. So we have to get that set together, and then that goes off. And so you're kind of waiting to get the site permit going so that they can do site work while you're developing the rest of the drawings. And then in that particular project, we also had what we call value engineering, which happens a lot on projects. Again, that budget thing coming over to haunt us. So we had to do a little bit of redesign within the process, but I think all told, it ended up being 12 months for the construction documents.
And here's a really good question that students start to ask as they learn the roles of architects. And Yusef asks, what are the different roles between a project architect and a senior designer?
Oh, that's a really good question. So a senior designer is someone that would kind of help champion. They could be either the project designer or just a senior designer working underneath a project designer. Really the look and feel, the concepts, thinking about the space, the adjacencies, really the form of the building. And then a project architect is someone that is actually, their main job is to oversee the drawing sets, to make sure all of that information on how the building gets built is put into the drawings and gets communicated. Because I work in a larger company, we have dedicated people that are spec writers, and that's also goes in hand. So you have your drawings, and then you have your spec books, which can be really thick. And they actually are kind of the written narrative for the construction documents. And so a project architect has to be coordinating what's going into the specs with the spec writer. And they're also coordinating what's actually getting drawn into the set and how things are being detailed. So a project designer is a little more big picture, but still needs to understand how a building goes together. And then a project architect is really focusing on the drawing sets, executing the design intent. And in my studio, there's always a dialogue. So it's not like the project architect can't have input on the design or vice versa. It's a team effort, but each person has their individual focus.
That's a great description there. I had a question on materials on that. I believe it was the condo hotel building that used the wine barrels as wall cladding. Was that an idea that you guys came up with? Because it hadn't been done before, right? To use it for that.
Yeah, we've been just kind of like talking about what could be, you know, again, celebrating what the history of that company is. It's called Constellation Wine Brands, but they actually have liquors a part of it. I think Svedka is one of, it was random, and Corona also, which I didn't even know those were related. But their roots are in wine. And so that's what we led with. And so we worked with the local fabricator to come up with the idea to kind of decompose all these different wine barrels and to create this textured wall. So it was
so they had to be taken and kind of held in place to be uncurled, if you will, to be utilized like that, right?
Right, and that's why you see a texture on the wall. Where is it? Oh, here we go. So that's what kind of creates, you can see like the curving of it because it still has that, but they're cut down into smaller pieces so that overall it feels flat. So that kind of is what's creating that nice fun texture.
Yeah, very cool. So 2 more quick questions and we'll let you resume on the practice. One, Eric, you had on the 50 Nations Plaza, being that he knows the Bay Area. What was the most challenging part of retaining historical architecture but ensuring sustainability? Which historical architecture are not originally?
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I mean, they weren't really, I would say they weren't really thinking about it, but you kind of had these rules when you were designing buildings that almost baked it in. So the walls are like already pretty thick initially. You have the stone that's out there, so you have a lot of mass in the building, which helps with cooling in general because you're kind of baking the outside. If you think of like adobe houses, it's already kind of behaving in that way. And then we looked at ways to kind of, unfortunately, the glass we couldn't. That was a really tough one because glass is another way that you lose energy, and it was single pane glass. But we ended up being able to get around that because we needed to have blast protection. So we had to improve the glass anyway because this was going to be used for a government building. And so that was a way to kind of elevate the efficiency of the envelope. And then like one of those diagrams looking at ways to bake in sustainability strategies into the areas that we needed to change. Like it had to be seismically retrofit. So we had to add those shear walls into the building and touch that because otherwise the building wouldn't be compliant. And so we used that to create these chimneys to help with the passive cooling. And so you just had to get creative on what you could do. And then a bonus is all of it's being reused. And so our carbon footprint got really small. We got innovation points for that. We added the PVs on the roof. They were okay with doing that. And so we just had to get really creative on how we squeezed in the different sustainability strategies because it was super important for this client to have a LEED platinum building. So that's the highest that we could go. And so we just had to have that eco-charrette, talk with the different engineers. It's great having them in the room because they were throwing out ideas that we didn't even think of, working with the contractor to make sure that the way that they were disposing of the waste was in line with LEED, things like that. So it just takes a little more coordination than a ground up project, but it was kind of nice that there were already some sustainability benefits to using a historical building.
And the last question Sato had was, how long did you work at HOK before you were promoted to design principal?
Oh, another great question. So I had been at HOK for 10 months. I actually got hired into the role. I was with my previous company for 16 years. I started there as fresh out of school. I was wrapping up my master's degree, got hired full time. So I was a non-title professional. And then I worked my way up from associate to vice president to principal. And then I actually had this opportunity, somebody reached out to me about this opportunity to come join HOK. And so I looked at kind of what they were doing and their, which I'll get into here in the practice, which is a great segue question. And it was much more in alignment with my goals and values. And so I made the jump. And so within the architecture space, some people will tell you that the best way to get promoted is to move around a lot, look for the next position that's higher at another firm. My tact was a little different because I was with that company for 16 years. And so for me, I looked at kind of what I was doing. I knew I wanted to get licensed. So I really focused on, well, to be honest, I did push it off a little bit. And I was like, well, let me just do LEED first because that's one test. And for when I was taking it, there were 7 tests for the architecture exam. I was like, let me get those letters first before I get the rest of the letters. So I did procrastinate a little bit. But once I got it, then I got promoted to associate. I think I'd been with the company about 5, maybe 6 years. And I looked at what people were doing that were in positions higher than mine, kind of understanding what they were doing. And then I decided, is that something I want to do? And if the answer was yes, then I would kind of look at how they were doing it and figure out how I could put my swing on it and do it the way that I thought I would want someone to talk to me when I was younger, or, looking at kind of analyzing what other people were doing. I would try things on. I did a little bit of healthcare and realized that that's not really like something I love doing. I can do it, but I tend to gravitate more towards hospitality. In my role now, I get to touch everything. So that always keeps it very interesting, all the different sectors. But I really looked at what people were doing in the levels above me and used that as a roadmap to kind of chart my course and get promoted within the company that way, which led to me, again, taking this step up at HOK.
All right. Great questions. So all think about any others you have. Of course, great answers. So I'll let you move into HOK. I don't know if you knew I actually worked there for like 7 years. So I'd love to hear you talk about the history of the firm a little bit and what they're doing now and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to focus on kind of specifically the LA practice. We are a worldwide firm. We have 24 offices around the world, and the LA practice started in 1983. So it's going to be approaching 40 soon. We had been at our Culver City location for 20 years, and now we're going to be moving to the Row, which you're seeing kind of ghosted in the background. So our Los Angeles studio, one of the things that attracted me to it is 75% of our leadership in LA is female. So you don't typically see that in a architecture practice. And so it's nice that this large firm is practicing what they preach. They have a diversity advisory council that was founded 10 years ago. So it's not something that they're just getting into in 2020, which I think is great that a lot of firms are realizing it, but you can clearly tell that this firm is a lot more established in that space and wanting to constantly do better and looking at the actual numbers. 51% of our staff is female, and 45% of our employees are people of color. And then not just looking at that metric, but looking at the fact that 36% of our principal leadership in LA are people of color. So not just looking at, you know, it one way and kind of averaging out the numbers, but understanding the importance of having people of color in leadership roles, which was something that I think is a huge differentiator for HOK. And then I think because of all these great things, we have the highest retention rate across the firm. So, you know, it goes a long way to have diversity within the office, diversity within the leadership, and it shows that that people do feel that they have a better sense of belonging within the studio and want to stay and more fun. So that helps. We've won a few awards. We were rated 6th and best places to work, and this is across all industries of large firms. And so we got 6, not just in architecture, but in all the places in LA. Myself and the managing principal, Ann Fletcher, we in 2022, we were awarded, we're selected as one of the women of influence in construction and architecture and engineering. Very exciting. Again, I mentioned we are going to the Row. We've had various women in leadership awards. And so there's lots of fun things that are happening within the office. This is a snapshot of our leadership. So we have 4 principals that are leading the office. Myself, Ann Fletcher, Julianne Knox, and Dave Fry. Our director of interiors and architecture are both women. We have director of design for interiors. We're a multidisciplinary practice. And so we have architecture, we have interiors, we have landscape, and we have experience design, which is our graphics department. So environmental graphics, as well as signage and wayfinding. And we also have planning and sustainability in our LA studio alone. Across the firm, we also have mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering. We have structural engineering and consulting groups. So we have consulting groups that focus on workplace, which I mentioned before. We have some that focus on medical and lab planning, and also do hospital consulting as well. So lots of disciplines that work together, and it's nice that we're under the same umbrella, so we speak each other's language. Some key market sectors in our LA practice: S&T, which stands for science and technology, which some firms might call life science. Sometimes they break it out as life science and technology, but we kind of group it together at HOK. A&T, because we like our acronyms. So that is aviation and transportation. And so that's basically how you move around: planes, trains, a little bit of, well, not really automobiles, but planes and trains, and then healthcare. And so one of our major sectors is healthcare. We also have in our LA practice, we have commercial interiors, we have commercial architecture. So that's like mixed use developments as well as offices, office towers. And we also have hospitality, and I'm bringing it over my hospitality knowledge and expertise into the practice. And so we have a few irons in the fires there as well. But these three are our key sectors. Here's some examples of some of the projects that we have going on. This is Soka University. This one is just completing. This is USC Ginsburg. This is going to be their first LEED project on their campus. It's going for LEED Gold. We wanted this project to really, it has some lab components, some classroom components, and we really wanted it to feel open. So it's kind of it's a deviation from a lot of the buildings that you see on USC's campus. It feels more modern, it feels more transparent instead of like the more typical completely brick small windows. So we have a little bit of that, but we wanted to expose and open the corners so you can kind of see what's happening within the inside space within this large atrium. This is a confidential project. And so that's one of the things when you get into your space, you have clients that don't want people to know until it's time, but you get a sneak peek of it here. So this is a science and technology project down in San Diego. It's a lab building. And so on the edge, you're seeing kind of the office space, and then inside in the core of the building are the actual lab areas. So you're getting a natural light where you're out working, and then you go in and towards the core of the building. We actually slid the building a bit here, so you actually have ways to get natural light into the actual core element where the majority of the labs are. This is a project we recently won on Caltech's campus. It's the Ginsburg Center for Quantum Precision Measurement, which is a mouthful. It is a higher ed project with the lab component. So there's lab building, classrooms. This is the proposal for the rooftop. We're actually, we just won the project. And so we had this kind of really zoomy design. And then we had one that was a little more traditional, because in competitions, you don't necessarily, because you're not talking to the client in depth as you would if you won the project. So we wanted to cover our bases, and we won the project, and they're like, we want something in the middle. So we're currently redesigning it, but it will have a very cool element of some sort. This one, we are in a joint partnership with Arup, and we are the principal architect for LAWA, which is Los Angeles World Airports. And so we're not fully responsible for all the construction that you're seeing driving through it right now, but there will be more. They're adding 2 new terminals. There's what they call Conrack. So they've added this people mover here, so you're able to move through the site. And so that's what you're seeing that's under construction when you go there and you look up and you see all the stuff that's happening above you. So that'll allow you to move from terminal to terminal. We have a concessions project, which you'll see that's happening down at, well, it's actually cut off here. It's happening down here across from the international terminal. And a lot of this work is being done to help elevate the airport and get it ready for the 2028 Olympics. So there's going to be, unfortunately, a lot of work there up until that time, but it should be perfect once it's done. This is the concession project that I mentioned down the way. So this actually ties in the automated people mover, the APM drops you off actually, on this side, drops you off on here, so you can actually look down into this space and see kind of the sign here. And then there's escalators that take you down to this concessions. That's actually what we call landside. So it's outside of the security zone. So there's not a lot of that there at LAWA or at LAX right now. And so this is an opportunity to actually have concessions before you get into the actual secured part. So say if you're here waiting for your friend, their flight got delayed, you can come in this space. If you get there early, you can kind of hang out. And there, I forget how many thousands, it's kind of scary how many thousands of people work at the actually work at LAX, and they don't have a lot of food offerings because they're usually landside, they're not on the secure side. So this actually provides nice concessions for the people that actually make the that actually work at LAX. This is a project that's going to be opening summer this year. This one was a adaptive reuse project. It is on MLK's medical campus. And so it was a decommissioned hospital. I think it was decommissioned in 2010. And so this is repurposing it and turning it into a behavioral health center, which is very exciting. There's going to be lots of different community programs here, from probation, mental health. It's going to be a one-stop shop, which is really exciting. And the original building was designed by Paul Revere Williams. Paul Revere Williams, who's an amazing African-American architect. And so we basically reinvigorated the exterior. We added these lit art pieces here that have very meaningful encrypted meaningful etched things that light up at night, but we really cleaned up and preserved a lot of the architecture. We shifted the main entry, the drop-off area, and then we wanted the space to feel warm and inviting for people during this difficult time in their lives. We incorporated some artwork from, these are actually pictures of houses in the surrounding neighborhood that are kind of pixelated, so you kind of, it's speaking to that feeling of not knowing what's going on, but still giving you the essence of home. If you kind of squint your eyes, you can see the home. So that's a really beautiful statement as you come into the main lobby space, and then using lots of bright colors. This is USC, Inland Valley, UHS Inland Valley. This is a replacement hospital project for UHS, United Health System. And this one, they wanted it to feel a little more modern. Usually hospital projects, they don't have the biggest budget. And so this was kind of a balancing act to make it feel clean and timeless and modern, but still staying within their budget. And this is City of Hope. This project is under construction right now. And there's an existing hospital, and then this is an extension on that project. And then another recent one, another behavioral health. So this is UCLA Neuropsych Replacement Hospital. This was a hospital that was decommissioned right before the pandemic and is being repurposed for UCLA's behavioral health. They were running out of space on their main campus at UCLA, and they were trying to fit it onto this one floor, and it just wasn't working. So now it's going to have its own replacement hospital, giving them a lot more space, a lot more beds, so that they can actually help the population. You know, one of the things that we've learned, and I think people are starting to put more emphasis on in the right way, is the necessity for behavioral health and how much we need it. I think these 2 years of being alone and isolated and everything that's come out of that, and the homelessness population and crisis that we have in LA, we really need to be investing more funds into helping people with these behavioral health issues so that they can get on the right page and rebuild their life. And so it's nice to be a part of 2 major projects within LA that can help people rebuild their lives. And that's it. So thank you, and more questions.
Wow. We'll have a few more questions, so you could go to sleep, since you apparently don't do much of that.
Right. It's fine. It's an addiction. I'll sleep later on.
So if you do have a few other questions, put them in the chat, folks. But I saw another one from Eric Yu, was what is the biggest redesign to LAX that was most imperative that you would know of? That would be the load to that.
Ooh, I mean, it's kind of a shame how I think it's like number 3 in volume in terms of airport, and it's just kind of been neglected. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But I think what they're doing to help with the traffic flow, kind of pulling out. So on the Conrac project, which we weren't a part of that. That was before we got this contract with LAWA. By having that, adding the people mover, that'll help with the flow throughout LAX. So you won't be, when it's done, in theory, you won't be in so much traffic trying to move around. And then they're adding 2 new terminals. So that should also help with kind of the traffic and the flow, the space, and then just refreshing it. It does not look like a world-class airport right now. And so I think that'll help, because this is going to be our gateway and our front door for the Olympics, people coming into LA, and we really need LAX to live up to the expectation beyond just the really cool colored totems. So there's a lot there, and we're glad to be a part of making it better.
Can you go back to that slide of the
Yeah.
the view of that people mover area right there? Yeah.
Yeah, so
Can
this is
you
a new term.
That's a whole new terminal. Is
Oh, yeah.
that like basically beyond Terminal 7, if you will?
Yeah, so this is going to be Terminal 9 here. So these are the existing terminals here, and where LAX kind of ends now, which is, you have the beautiful space kind of, I forget what the official name of this one is, but you've got that kind of googie architecture bit there, and then all of this, the traffic control tower, that all exists. And so they're kind of, it's a loop, so they can't expand that way, so they're expanding this way. So there's going to be this Terminal 9 and Terminal 0. So that's Southwest Terminal 1 here. So they're going to expand this way to make it to kind of keep up with the existing volume, and then having that people mover snake through to connect everything so that you can ditch the car and then come in, or move around terminal to terminal. And again, having that concessions, that's land side, this is plane side, obviously, where the planes are. And then having that land side will help give a little bit better flow to the space.
And the people mover comes from the new metro line that comes down Crenshaw and comes along Aviation. This is what it'll connect to.
Right. Yeah. So if you follow this around and kept going, it would take you kind of further east and north to where Conrack is located, which is there's parking and their rental car facility there. So you could go there. So if you fly in, you need a rental car, you could just take the people mover there. You can park your car there and drive, or park your car there and then take the people mover out. But it's trying to decongest. All of that is to try to help decongest all the craziness.
Yes. So if you come here, you won't miss the Olympics when you get here.
By the time you get to,
by the time you get there,
yeah.
They're very interesting. I do know the firm that is working on that Conrack, and for those that were at the last lecture with Steve Lewis, his former firm that he helped form is a firm working on that. So maybe one day we'll have them talk about that component, because that is this whole thing tying together is really awesome. So a couple of other questions were what advice do you have in terms of licensure?
Do it. Get it done. It is very important to do it. Like I said, I wanted to be an architect at the age of 9. And so it was weird, like working for an architecture firm before I got it. And like people would ask you what you do. And I'm like, well, I think the technical, you're always an intern architect until you get licensed. But then people think you're in school, and I'm like, I have a master's degree. So there's that. So it was nice to be able to just say I'm an architect. That's what my necklace says, architect. So I'm very proud of that. It's something that nobody can take away from you unless you like violate the law, and then that's a whole nother thing. And it is daunting and it is hard. And I think there's a lot of hazing involved in it, but it never gets easier. So you just have to do it. And so, like, to use the cliche, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? It's literally one scoop at a time. So I started out by thinking about, I got some good advice from my mentor to first test to be something that I was used to doing. So when I started out at HKS, I was put on a design team. And so the schematic design portion of that project, or of that, the schematic design portion of that test really spoke to me because I felt comfortable doing it. So it kind of was a way for me to kind of ease my way into it. And so if you say start at a firm and you're doing lots of construction drawings, then maybe you want to do, I forget what they call it. They call everything different now, but do the test that's more geared towards the CDs.
Kind of, materials and methods, those sort of things.
Yeah. So if you're really focusing on detailing, maybe you want to do materials and methods first. And so that's a way to get your toe in the water. And then another great advice was always like, just set your date. So I used about 4 to 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the subject matter to study. And I would always book the test. And so, there's a fee if you cancel it. So that would motivate me because I didn't want to lose the fee. And so you just have to stay focused. I would study at lunch. I would study on the train because I was up in the Bay Area doing it, going back and forth. And then, I didn't really have a life, but it's like you just needed to get it done. And then I would take the test and they wouldn't tell me if I passed or failed because back then you had to wait for it to get in the mail and probably take at least a month or so for you to get this letter to understand if you need to then book the test again, which is like just enough time for you to forget, which is super annoying. But now you find out right away. So you can say, okay, like I need, and I think they lessen the time too between taking the next test. But no matter if you fail or if you pass the test, you now know more than you did before because you're going to be better prepared the next time you sign up. So don't let that discourage you. Just keep going. Most people don't pass all their tests on the first time. I am not most people. I did pass them all the first time, but I also had no life. So depending on how you balance it. But overall, get it done. Each step you take is a step forward. And next thing you know, you'll be done. I wanted to also sync up my finishing the test with my hours. And so once I started getting kind of halfway point in my hours, I was like, okay, I need to start studying for my test. And I used that as a yardstick. But the sooner you do it, the better. And then you never have to deal with it again. Just do it.
And I'll preface those two comments in there. One is, of course, she's talking post-graduating from school.
Yes.
To get to there. And when she said sync her hours, there's X number of hours that you have to have before you can be licensed, even if you pass the exam. So
right.
When you usually get a professional degree, say a 5-year degree, you still need about 2 years of internship. So you need that. And you also need to have passed the exams. So you can sync with all of those things. But certainly these are good questions to ask, but they kind of things start to become clearer to you post-graduation and you start to work for firms and you start to garner experience, as Adaeze is saying, in whatever market sector, project types, and then what you do on those projects, all of this starts to sync up. You need it all, but there you go. I did have one comment that just one gentleman had, and I missed who his name was, but he just commented, I am so glad that I came to this lecture. Your position as a principal designer is the exact role that I am striving for in this industry. The lecture really gave me an idea of what a principal designer does. Very inspirational.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm glad that helped to inspire you. So one of the main reasons when Ruben reached out and other people have reached out, I think it's super important to expose people in school to what it looks like on the other side, because there's all these different forces and different things you're doing, and like, what does it actually look like beyond the tools you're learning in school? So I always like to share my experiences, and hopefully you'll be able to get to this level light years before me, now that you have these kind of tips and tricks.
Well, I did see one other question here that is a good one. Sato asked, are you part of the AWA? Why or why not? With so many associations, NOMA, AIA, IIDA, MOUSE.
Yes, there's a lot. So I am a part of that, though admittedly with COVID, I haven't been that active. I'm also a part of AIA. AIA is Women in Architecture. There's also NOMA, which is super important to be a part of. You get to make lots of great connections with people that have similar experience with you and can help guide you. And then I'm also a part of in my role now, I'm also a part of different organizations like ULI, learning about the clients. So that's ULI is Urban Land Use Institute. And there are a lot of developers in that group. So it helps with networking, kind of learning more about the client side, what they need, what they're looking for in projects. But really all of those groups are great tools to help you kind of widen your pool of people that can be a sounding board for you, that can be, mentor doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's dedicated to you. They don't have to be somebody that's older than you can get information from a peer, and you can meet all those types of people in these different organizations. That's one of the things I wish I would have gotten involved in more coming out of school. It took me a while because I was so focused on work and licensure, and which are all great things, but I think I should have carved out a little bit more time to actually be involved in these different organizations. And you meet really cool people that are, that share your same love and passion for design. So you can connect on that level, and they understand when you're like, oh, I was up late doing this section drawing. I've been working on it for 3 days, and they're like, oh yeah, I know it's hard. But if you tell someone who's out of the industry that I've been working on a drawing for 3 days, and you're like, how is that possible? Like what? So it's nice to be able for them to you speak each other's language. And I've developed a lot of good friends out of those types of organizations.
And I will add to that, as you said, like ULI, which are not architects, but it's a lot of developers and folks in urban planning and the like that you do, you guys as students, look at the different organizations that may speak to you. So if you liked what Adaeze was doing with hospitality, for example, there are hospitality orgs that are not architects, and they meet and they talk about different things that deal with that market sector. So it's starting to find out those different things. I tell people all the time, you want to be in the film industry. You're not just in the film industry. Do you want to act, or do you want to write, or do you want to direct? So you're not going to just go, you're not going to go hang out with, Drew Barrymore and Denzel Washington. If you want to write, you want to deal with people that are in that sector. So start to look at the different organizations that deal with that, and you'll be surprised. You learn a lot from that, hanging out with non-architects.
Yeah. And it, to your point, Ruben, there's so many different things that architects can do. People who major in architecture, you can do so many different aspects, and you can specialize. There's Construction Specifications Institute, where they love writing specs, and thank God for them, because I don't know how to do that. It's a lot of writing. But you can stay open to all the different facets, because school can only touch on so much, but the world of architecture is so big, and design influence is so big. So be open. You might find yourself on the client side. You might find yourself working for a contractor, because they need the design thinking as well to help translate what the hell we're talking about, to them. So there's so many different things that you can do with your degree beyond just being an architect. So it's nice to be able to use those organizations to get exposure to that, and always stay open, because you never know if you're going to like something or not until you try it. That's how I understood kind of what I wanted to do, because I tested different things out, and I was like, do I really want to be in the field all day? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, let me try this, let me try that. So just be open and test and have fun.
I try and tell them that all the time.
Yeah.
So, hey, without keeping you much later, Rosie, Juliana, and I'm sure everybody that was in attendance, Dan Richardson, which is one of the other profs, I share the same sentiment. Thank you so much for doing this, and the way you presented it, it was great. And we have it archived now that we can show others that foolishly missed it.
Yeah, spread it around.
Yeah, spread it around. So thank you so much. If there's not anything else, I think we will adjourn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for your lovely questions, and I wish you the best of luck in your career.
Thank you, Daisy. It was
you.
great.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.